marketing for the institution. But he has spoken on this subject, I think, unwritten. I don't know whether he's come with his book on this. A very nice book which I commend to you. I think it came out of the workshops that he was doing at Evangel Baptist Church on the creation story and what we can learn from it. So I want to now invite Pastor Mbewe to speak and lay down the biblical principles related to this idea of faith-based entrepreneur. So can we all just welcome Pastor Mbewe to come and speak? And Pastor has about 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm glad to be with you and share with you what I have on the subject of called to create. In the schedule, what I noticed is that I had 30 minutes, and so that's what I prepared for, bearing in mind that mine is a laying of a foundation, and then someone else will come and build on it. Two quick points that I need to say. First of all, on the book that has just been mentioned, the copies ran out. We are about to reprint. Initially, I was hoping to edit it further and beef it up, but the demand has become so much that we've decided, okay, let's just print again, and then we will revise it afterwards. So expect the book to be out in the next month or so, and basically it's entitled Transforming Our Working Culture, but it is based on the first chapter of the book of Genesis. The second thing that I want to say is that this coming Saturday, I'll actually be doing a morning's presentation on a businessman, an entrepreneur in the USA by the name of Truett Cathy. That name might not ring a bell to any of you, or rather to most of you, but he, at the end of the First World War, together with his brother, began a business based on a sandwich, just a sandwich, and a chicken sandwich in America. And so that was in 1946. He's a Christian businessman. And today, it is by far the most profitable restaurant in the whole of America, by far. Okay, so in terms of total income, it is behind McDonald's, which most of you will know. But in terms of per shop, it beats McDonald's by far, and it is called Chick-fil-A. And what is amazing is that it never operates on Sunday, and yet it beats McDonald's by far. So this coming Saturday, I will be speaking on him. The decision was made many years ago. Last year we failed to do so, primarily because of COVID. But now it's good that we are speaking about his business this coming Saturday, because we are right now in the process of them sponsoring the African Christian University. They'll probably be our major sponsor again by far. So it's good for us to think about Christian involvement in entrepreneurship, faith-based, and he's a typical example of someone who has done exactly that. One of his principles, for instance, is if you're going to run his business, he does not accept that you simply franchise it while you are doing something else. It must become your actual business, and through it, you interact with your immediate community. And therefore, as people come to buy that little sandwich, you, as the actual business owner, develop a relationship with them. I could go on. You can imagine I'm saturated with this guy by now, but I'll be handling it next weekend. What I'm dealing with today is in Genesis and chapter 1. So if we could turn there. Genesis and chapter 1. I will read beginning with verse 26, and we will go on to, I really had up to verse 4 of chapter 2, but I won't go that far. We'll just read the first few. Genesis 1, verse 26. The Bible reads, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful," which is what I'll spell, verse 28. "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heaven, over every living thing that moves on the..." I'll end my reading there. I begin by saying that there is nothing more frustrating in life than purposelessness. In other words, to have individuals who, when you ask the question, "Why do you exist?" Or, let's put it a little different, it is having perhaps a young person who is going through his teenage years, and then you ask him the question, "Why do you exist?" A lot of people actually don't have an answer to that question, except the fact that, well, I was born. My parents gave me birth, and I have to try and make the best out of this situation. The world is going wrong. Thankfully, I have some level of education. If I can have a good job and so forth, that's why I am there. That's never fulfilling. It is never satisfying. And often it is because individuals have not been helped to understand the mind of the Creator himself. Whoever is behind it, and we know that it is God, wanted us to get to know him and therefore be able to live according to his will. Okay, the reason why those pews are there that you are sitting on, it's because whoever it is who put them together was preparing them for this particular building so that you who are worshipers could sit on them and worship. Bottom line is this, that to know the purpose for our lives, we have to go beyond our parents who brought us into the world to the Creator who purposed human existence. And that's the reason why coming to a passage such as the creation mandate is so useful. Because in this passage of scripture, we are told that God actually gave a purpose for our existence. And that purpose is this: be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over all other creatures. So what we are doing this morning in the few minutes that I have is to take a few steps backwards from entrepreneurship. Mr. Cheta will come and handle the details of it. But to take a few steps backwards so that we can, as it were, paint the backdrop that makes entrepreneurship meaningful or purposeful. So that we don't just try and go straight into it, because when we try to do that, we end up doing so like typical non-Christians. And the typical non-Christian approach is you go into it to make money. And as I always say to people, money is a terrible master. It's a good servant, but it's a very terrible master. And if you begin to live for it, the Bible is very clear that those who aim for riches end up destroying themselves. Rather, it is a good servant. In other words, you can utilize it for God's glory and for the good of the world. I thought before I plunge into this, we should at least have a common definition, a one-sentence understanding of what entrepreneurship is. Now, since this is not your first seminar, and since a number of you are already in that world, I just want to ask, I hope you are all friends with one another here, so you won't feel like, answering a question publicly, I'll make a fool of myself. Okay. In your own understanding, in your own mind, and you probably are right, we may just tweak the sentence a little bit. What is an entrepreneur? Or who is? Or what is entrepreneurship according to you? So that we know what it is that we want to paint the backdrop for. What is this creature? Who is an entrepreneur, or what is entrepreneurship? Yes. Okay. All right. So there are a number of thoughts that are in that statement which we need to maintain. And one of them is simply that an entrepreneur is a person who starts things. Okay, so he starts things. He creates. He brings into birth something. So, yes, it is possible that your friend might have been the one who came up with the entire idea, but finally you join hands with him or her and get this thing going. So you participate in those early stages of getting this going. So the creation is the main idea. So an individual who's simply buying and selling, often to us is the entrepreneur. He's buying here and selling there. He buys here and sells there. And so he's making a profit, and we think he is an entrepreneur. The primary idea is that of bringing into birth something and developing it. The second, which Professor Wawahi brought out for attention, is the aspect of providing goods or services. In other words, it's where through genuine creative thinking you come up with means and ways in which you provide a service or you provide goods, and consequently, often, a business is birthed. A business is birthed. And for most of us, we end up being employed in such businesses. And I think the idea that is presently here is, hang on, shouldn't we also be seriously bringing to birth these ideas? The answer is a resounding yes. A resounding yes. And it lies in these same words that we have just been looking at here. First of all, when we think in terms of the creation mandate, it explains to us what life was meant to be even without Genesis 3. Genesis 3 gives us the fall that took place. Let's assume the fall never happened. Let's assume we never ever ended up dealing with sickness, dealing with suffering, dealing with death, dealing with hell. Let's assume all those things were never to be. What would we have been doing? Three things. Number one, we would have been marrying and having children. Marrying and having children. There it is. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The first and simplest meaning of this phrase is Adam and Eve, husband and wife, have children and start multiplying on the earth. Produce your kind. Now, later on, when we think in terms of entrepreneurship as well, the point is it is founded on the family. It's founded on the family. The home is that nucleus that is the anchor for all development. I was talking about Kathy Truett. He's since died. His children have since taken over his business. And the mission for Chick-fil-A continues through the children. It's the same for you. You will die. I know it's bad news for you, but it's going to happen. You will die. When you die, your property, even if it's just a shirt and trousers, will be handed over to your children and so forth. Okay, it's society generally understands that you hand over whatever it is to your next generation. So that's part of this. And it necessitates that as human beings, therefore, we must cultivate our values through our children. We must cultivate our values through our children. Because they are the ones who are going to take over whatever it is that we have lived for, labored for, developed, etc., etc. The wise man Solomon makes the point in Ecclesiastes that that's one of the biggest frustrations of human beings. It is the fact that you can develop an entire empire, and then when you die, your children who take over, they blow it up, just like that, blow it up. They are perhaps drunkards, and so they sell everything for a song just to go and drink. And he says, what's the point? That you should come to the end of your life and then everything you lived for goes up in smoke. So even as we here are thinking in terms of faith-driven entrepreneurship, we must never lose sight of the fact that we cannot build when our own homes are falling apart. We can't. Everything must begin there, because ultimately an entrepreneur hands over to that same family. And then I will build on that in a moment. But that's the first. Added to that, therefore, is our jealousy for the family. Our jealousy for the family. That we as individuals who are Christians, if we are going to see true entrepreneurship, we must defend the bedrock on which all human existence and the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Notice, it's not just a companion to kill his boredom, but it is an assistant, a partner with whom to carry out this work that God had given to him in the earlier verses. And then it is not long before that you begin to see in chapter 4 children beginning to come into existence. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. And then verse 2, and again she bore his brother Abel. But notice the next verse. It may not have occurred to you before, but entrepreneurship has already begun. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. The basic point there is that both of them went into business. One was keeping animals, the other was raising crops. Already you can see that the home is where this development has taken place. And so you can begin developing further and further from there. For instance, when you get into chapter 6, the Bible says there, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that daughters of man were attractive. They took them as wives and so on, and families there began to multiply, but they were multiplying here also in terms of in a sinful way and degenerating in the process. Well, God finally punished them across chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, and chapter 9. When we get into chapter 10, again, you are seeing families multiplying. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. And then you've got a whole list, and it's a list of sons having families, sons having families, sons having families. And finally, we get into chapter 11. There's the Tower of Babel there, which was a major enterprise, which was selfish, sinful, and God frustrated it. And then finally, Abraham comes in, which is the birth of the New Testament church through the Old Testament. In a new beginning, a redemptive one. Okay, so all I'm saying is everything we'll be dealing with here is simply at this stage in seed form. And then as you start making your way through the Bible, it is opening up and opening up and opening up. It's basically teaching us to understand the beginning and everything that comes out of it. So the first is it is founded on the human family. The second is that it is developed on discovery. On discovery. A new term might be research. Let's go back to our text. Let's go back to our text. The Bible says there, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And then it says, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the ground. That statement is basically saying, I am making you my regents, my deputies on the earth. Okay? I have created everything. I'm leaving it into your hands now to manage. That's what he's saying. You're going to manage it. You are the ones who are going to look after it. We see it opened up further in chapter 2. Chapter 2 and verse 15. Chapter 2 and verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. To work it and to keep it. Now, friends, anybody who gives you something to look after immediately is assuming knowledge. Or if you don't have that knowledge, he teaches you that knowledge. It's obvious. Let me use an obvious example. If I was to leave you with my car, I'm going away for a whole month, and I say, look after my car. I'm working on the assumption, number one, you know how a car operates. You can drive a car. You know what not to do with a car, because if you do it, you destroy it. For instance, you don't put water in the fuel tank. Okay? It assumes knowledge. And so, the moment God is saying to Adam and Eve here that I am leaving these things in your hands, he's already assuming that human beings are going to be those who learn, those who research, those who discover. And what are they discovering? That which God has already put into this world. He's already put into it. And ours is therefore to find these things, especially the governing principles that are in them, and it is out of that that finally development will come. So the entire educational process draws out of this, grows out of this. The task that we have, for instance, to teach our children the basics, take them through primary education, secondary education, and even all the way to tertiary education. It is because they can only be responsible in the world when they have learned how the world functions according to the way in which God has prepared the world. May I suggest the same thing with respect to entrepreneurship as well? One of our major disasters as Christians is that we are copycats. That's what we are. You look at your friend and he is buying and selling something and making some money. And you say, I think I can also do it. Why should I remain poor? And you also now put in yourself into that, and then everything falls apart in your case. Really, we tend to overlook that our first responsibility as human beings is that of acquiring knowledge. That's our first. That of acquiring. Whatever field it is that finally we are going to find ourselves in as entrepreneurs, our number one task is that of acquiring knowledge. Now, I can open this up further. Some of you by now know the issues of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It's, again, the principles of learning that are literally in all areas of life. And it's something that we can open up there. In the book that I've written, the one that Professor was referring to here, Transforming Our Working Culture, I basically developed that thought because when God creates, the first thing he does is to say, let there be light, and there was light. That was the first day. And then I asked the question, why? Why did God begin with light? And then, of course, I challenge our thinking. Us, we cannot do anything without light. We desperately need light. If it's dark, we can't fix anything. We can't create anything. But God doesn't need light because for him, darkness is as good as light. Okay, he sees without light. So why did he begin with light? And in the book, I argue that it is because he is acting as our prototype. He's leaving us an example. And so although light finally, in terms of the sources of light, are only brought into existence on the fourth day, he deliberately already ensures that light is in place because light stands for knowledge, and that we need knowledge in order to do anything. So I argue from that perspective. Okay, so again, the disaster that we find in chapter 4 when Cain kills Abel is quite simple. It is the fact that what God required was a bloody sacrifice. That's what he required. Well, Cain took from his crops that which he could give to God. Well, God rejected it. He accepted Abel's sacrifice instead. Now, again, it was based on knowledge. It's based on knowledge. Without knowledge, it backfires, and so forth. So the whole idea, again, is when it comes to subduing the earth, and here we're thinking in terms of entrepreneurship, knowledge is key. We must be, as individuals, deliberately wanting to learn and learn and learn. And as we learn, we are better instruments in the hands of God. I made a statement earlier that what you are learning are the principles that God has already imbued into creation. That's what you are learning. And I think it's important for us to just pause there for a moment. I know my time has run out. I'll come to subduing in a moment. But I think it's just crucial for us to see that ultimately, even in entrepreneurship, it's not that you are trying to bring about something that's just ingenious. It is that you are recognizing that this is the way human beings are made. This is the way society is made. This is the way in which this world is made by the Creator himself. And then all you are doing is harnessing that potential in order for you to create a better world. That's basically all you're doing. And that's absolutely dependent on knowledge. Let me hurry on to the third aspect. And it is development itself. So I notice, first of all, it's founded on the family. Secondly, it hangs on knowledge itself, or research, or discovery. And then thirdly, that's where you build development. And really, entrepreneurship is development. It is creating something in terms of the fact that you are adding to that which is already in existence. So, back to our text. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. The idea there is that God has already put in creation that which we have now discovered through learning, through the research, and so forth, through discovery. So we have found this. Now it is our job to use that to subdue. So we are now going beyond the classroom. We are going beyond learning. We are now doing something with that which we have learned. And what is that? In our text, we have those two words, subdue and dominion. Subdue and dominion. That is something that we do, first of all, based on the discovery of a previous generation. So we build on a previous generation. But then secondly, we develop our own, and that's entrepreneurship. Okay? We build on a previous generation, and then we develop our own. And as that continues, that's the way in which we subdue, in this particular case, the earth. That's the way in which we multiply and consequently bring the earth itself into being subdued, into it being dominated by us. Let me obviously use one quick example, and I hope it will make the point. Communication. Communication. You can be an entrepreneur in the world of communication. Okay. And one way in which you can do it is simply go to India, or rather to China, and buy cheap phones, and then come to Zambia, open a small shop and start selling cheap phones. Okay. A lot of people are doing that. They are ordering cheap phones, selling them, just adding a markup. That's all. Now that's the world. That's the way it thinks. Because in the world, it's simply making money. That's all I'm thinking about. How can I make money? But as Christians, we are meant to be greater thinkers. we are meant to say, okay, this is about making communication easier for human beings. So let me, as an individual, learn about communication. So what you are doing then is you are going beyond merely buying and selling. You are recognizing that there are basic principles that God has put into this world. Let me learn about them. And before long, you begin to realize, okay, so cell phone technology is based on these kinds of basic principles, the wavelengths that are there and so on. You're not going into the details of engineers. All you are doing is seeking to understand more and more of the world in which you are basically operating. That we have gone from wire communication to something that God has put into the very air, this same air we are looking at. There's something in it that cell phone technology has consequently harnessed. And as you are in that business, you are now saying, okay, how can I add value to this so that even in this realm, I can make it better? And so as you are understanding that world, what's going to happen is that you will add value in that same world because you are beginning to understand it and you are saying, this is where the previous people have brought it. What can I add? And when we begin to think more like that, we become actual creators. We become real entrepreneurs. I'll be speaking about Kathy Truitt next week, so I'll leave him out for now. But if we think in terms of guys like Bill Gates, basically that's what happened. When I was studying engineering and we needed to use computers, the whole of UNZA only had one computer. The whole UNZA. It was a mainframe computer. We used to have cards that we used to put together and we would log in so that when your turn comes, you then go in with your cards and put them into the system. And it used to produce quite a bit of a printout and all the rest of it. Now, most of you thinking about that, that's like something we picked from Noah's Ark, isn't it? And it's completely outdated. Well, all that guys like Bill Gates did, and by the way, a college dropout for that matter, but all they did was to say, well, look, let's study this and let's make it more available to individuals. And that's where the phrase personal computer came in. And that's what the phrase PC actually is. It's just personal computer. And that's all they said, together with his friend in those days, Steve Jobs. Let's make this big thing to be available in the homes of individuals. Well, he's now one of the richest guys on the planet. Basically, learning and then developing on others. And here's the phrase, adding value. Now, the moment you realize this, you can apply it anywhere. And I really mean it. I can suggest to you that the Great Commission is actually a spiritualized creation mandate. That's all it is. It is this same creation mandate applied in the church context. That's all it is. Because this can be applied anywhere and everywhere. If we are going to be Christians in business, this is where we need to start. We need to stop thinking like the world, who merely think, how can I make money? And my friend is making money this way, let me copy and do the same thing. We need to be able to see that it should grow out of this tree. And if we can but apply ourselves to this, we're going to find that we will not just be creators, but we're going to be a blessing in the world in which we are. That by the time we die, we'll have something to hand over that has made the world a better place. Let me end there. I've taken 45 minutes instead of 30, but I trust that you've profited something. I'm around all the way through the Q&As, so if things are still not making or adding up, I'm around, we can discuss them there. Back to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Pastor. I think you'll all agree that was very, very insightful and so appropriate, setting for us a very good context. It just struck me as Pastor was speaking about Elon Musk. I'm sure you all know Elon Musk. You are looking blank. Elon Musk, I think he is now the richest man in the world. And he's an Israeli entrepreneur. And just what Pastor was talking about, that Bill Gates moved from the mainframe to moving the computer close to you. And Elon Musk had this idea of, instead of using petrol on the cars, why not use electricity? And when this concept was first proposed, all the car companies laughed at him. He had no source of support at all. But now, I think you will be aware, this is also making copper, of course, a very desirable mineral, because it means cabling, isn't it? So I think a number of countries have begun this concept. Of course, it's much cheaper as well, and also much more environmentally friendly. So just building on that concept. Now, I was wondering to myself whether we should have a question time now, or wait and have an answer and question session after the two speakers have spoken. I was proposing that maybe we could have a brief question time so that the questions don't build up and that maybe you don't forget them. What do you think? Is that okay? Okay. Yes? It's okay? Great. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll open up the floor maybe for, Pastor has spoken for about 45 minutes. We have maybe about 15, 20 minutes before we break for tea. So I'll open the floor for any questions. Is there a roving mic? Do we have a roving mic? There's a roving mic, so you don't have to, and also you can write a question. If you're feeling a little bit uneasy, you can write a question, push it up front, and I will read it out for you, but don't write in Tumbuka, which I can't read. Write it clearly enough. And, so there's a mic moving around, so if there are any questions, you can just raise your hand, and the mic will come to you. If you want to write, you can write, and then the question. Any questions so far? So there's only two things. Either the material was very clear, crystal clear, or it was very confusing. So I'm favoring the latter, that it was really clear, and we don't have any questions. So perhaps then, if there are no questions, we can break for tea. And across the tea period, if you have some question which maybe you didn't have enough courage to ask, you can just write it down, give it to me, and then we can, before the next session. So there is tea at the back there. So please feel free. Maybe Pastor can lead us. The tea table there at the back. There's water for those, and I think there's coffee and a few drinks. Please, let's take a break for about 15 minutes, and so we'll come back at 11:15.
things. First of all, I will deal with the general concepts about business and entrepreneurship. And secondly, I'm hoping that at the end of this, I can persuade you to become an agent for change. And that is through a discussion on what faith can bring to business. I think that it's important for us to be very realistic about the business environment in which we operate, so that when we are thinking about engaging in business, we go there fully aware of what we are likely to meet, the challenges that might impact on the beautiful ideas we might have, and therefore be more effective. As Pastor Mdewe said, we seek knowledge, and without knowledge, we can't do that. So let me begin with, first of all, the general concepts. Next slide. Next, please. Yeah. Let me first of all begin by saying that being in business as an entrepreneur is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. Now, this is important because we often see business as if it is some utopian thing or far distant thing that, only through some very special ceremony or abilities we must engage in. It's a lifestyle. Let me put it this way. Perhaps being in business is just an improved form of being in employment. There's a friend of mine who told me, look, okay, I'm doing my own thing, I'm in business, but I'm also employed. And I'm employed by those who bring business to me. The only difference is that we don't have a contract in which they pay me a salary per month, but I bring them services and they pay me. So, being in business is just a lifestyle. It's a form of employment, but in a different way. But it's also vocational. And I would dare say, in some sense, being in business as a form of a lifestyle is a kind of a calling. Now, we often associate it with Pastor Mbewe and elders, but I can tell you that being in business is a form of a calling. And this feeling that you are supposed to be there is an indispensable feeling, because as we will be discovering, business is a very difficult environment. Yeah? You need to be persuaded that you need to be there. It is not just something you went in and you can come out anytime. You feel that this is something that I must do regardless of the circumstances that I face. And in a way, that helps you to ride the storms of life, because they will come. They will come. We often imagine a businessman in this. Oftentimes, because when you're talking about business, we often talk about money and this person is rich. I was conscious of how many times, for example, we've heard the word being rich. That is what we see. But that's only for the very successful businessmen. A lot of businessmen don't reach that stage. And if you don't have the feeling inside that your skills and knowledges are intended to be spent where you are, it's very easy to give up. So in that sense, therefore, not everyone can do business. In fact, if you were to do statistics, people who do this business in this way, not just in terms of self-employment and you're doing something by the side, are very, very few in the world. They are very, very few. buying and selling people, there are many. So if you go to Soweto Market or Buseko, where people are just buying and selling, there are many. Yes, they are doing some aspect of business, but it's not really risk-taking, which is what the business person is involved in. And because it is of some form of a calling, the measurement of success is very different. Yes, making money is a form of measurement. But people who are entrepreneurs are not thinking entirely about the outcomes in terms of financial reward. They are thinking in terms of impacts. They are trying to solve a problem. And if they solve that problem and it doesn't bring them great rewards, but they are able to sustain themselves, they are satisfied. But thirdly, entrepreneurship or being in business has a purpose. Oftentimes, what drives a businessman or an entrepreneur is this feeling that there is a gap, there is a need I need to fill. And businesses which start like that are more likely to succeed, because the person is being driven by the feeling that there is an opportunity here, and I can do this. I have the skills and knowledges to be able to do it. But even much more importantly, the purpose of business or entrepreneurship is meeting human needs. You can do your own research and just do this exercise. How many businesses that have succeeded are not meeting a basic human need? I bet you will not find it. Now, you will not find a successful business that is not meeting some human need. Now, the need may not be perceived by the general population, but it's there. For example, the example that Pastor Mbewe gave about personal computers. Perhaps at the point at which this thing was, very few people felt that I needed to have a computer. Yeah? But there was somebody who was saying, look, we can make life easy here. And let me do this. And sometimes it often starts like a game. It's like a passion to do something. But it develops, and people realize afterwards, oh yeah, we are missing this. Can you imagine? What would life be today if you didn't have the internet? Can you imagine? And yet 20 years ago, I remember I don't know if I've said this before to an audience like this, perhaps I have. I first come across the internet when I was out of the country, and we were in a library as a student, and there was this French guy who was on those Mac computers, those used to have screens. When it was popping, you can even see the cursor moving. When you are typing in green letters. And I was thinking, Guillaume, what are you doing? So now I'm sending a letter to my friend in France. And me, the way I used to send letters was write a letter, go to the post office, put it in the box, and wait for 1 week before the answer comes back, maybe even 2 weeks. But people saw the need that you can actually link the world, or you can link friends. Talk about Facebook. I'm not on Facebook myself. It's just a choice. I just think Facebook is too busy for me. I can't find the time for it. But think about Facebook. Somebody just think, wouldn't it be nice if we could link people, they could see each other's face, and they could write things to each other. And now we are so consumed by Facebook that we think that it has always been there. It's actually a novelty. It's something that started only a few years ago. So, there is a need that is being met. But also, business has a purpose in that it enables us to use our talents. Each one of us has a repository of gifts, of special abilities. And one of the things that amazes me is music. How people can get almost in a timeless way. You know, music sound is like it's an endlessness about it. And people can get simple chords and put them together, and you feel like moving your body. You know what I mean? Those gifts. And sometimes it starts when people are very young. You just notice this fella. He can put things together. And in business can be this vehicle through which we feel, yeah, I can do this. I can do it on my own. And I have ability to do this. I know how to put a building together. And people are putting ramshackle things. Let me do this because I have the ability to do it. And you are using your talents in that way. But also it has a purpose of advancing the kingdom of God. I won't belabor this point because it's already been dealt with by Pastor. But business is also risky. It's very risky. When you start an idea, oftentimes it's in very romantic ways. You know, we'll go to this town, we'll do this business, as James puts it, we'll make a huge profit, and then we will drive the money into this and this. Then you take your first step. Then you find that, those eggs you have in the house, nobody wants them. Now you start looking for a market. And now how to find a market, so forth and so on. And you might find you've lost the money. You can actually lose huge amounts of money. This is why, for me, I have a lot of issues with motivational speakers. Motivational speakers, most of them have never tried to work at something. But they'll be telling you, they've read a few books here and there, and they are telling you how this can work. You just have to do this, you just have to do this. And when you try to practice it, you find that it doesn't work. By the way, a lot of modern preachers are also just motivational speakers. They are making their congregation guilty. You have not done this, you have not done this, if you do this, and so forth. You sow the seed into the man of God, and you keep sowing. It never comes out. Practice what they are doing, you are not as successful as they are. So, be aware of the risks. Anything you want to get involved in, try to the extent that you are able to appreciate the landscape that you want to climb. Because you get into there and you find the mouths of crocodiles open, ready to swallow you, and you start running away. Let me continue and say, again, we are just laying general principles about business. I'm aware that there are some of you who are thinking, but how do I start? So I just a very broad framework about a startup. I think the most important thing about a business is that you must have an idea. The idea must come first. I don't know how to overemphasize this. Because you might discover it later that if this is not sorted out at the very beginning, and it's something that you've thought through carefully, you will have a lot of problems. So the business idea comes first. That is to say the following. First, that passion is not enough. I'm passionate about it. I've heard people say, I'm very passionate about this. That's a good thing, but it's not enough. The business idea must have elements around it that give you a chance to make it. And some of those elements are as follows: that it must be relevant. Some people come up with a business idea and you're thinking, you're listening to it, and how, in which world is this man or woman living? But they are very passionate about it. No, I think I can make this. No, my friend, this is very difficult to. Have you thought through this? Have you thought through this? And very soon you discover that no, they have not processed it. They have not processed it. An idea must be relevant. In other words, it must have people who are willing to put their coin, to pay for that thing which you are going to be selling. And are you selling in the Protestant? So it means that you must research, you must consult, and some ideas can be dropped just at this point where you are researching and consulting, because you come across facts that tell you perhaps this idea is not for today, or I don't have the resources to be able to engage, or I don't have the skills that can turn this into a venture, but it must be relevant. And by relevance, I mean that the business idea can actually generate sales. You are, as a businessman, you are not a scientist. You are doing research for its own sake. You are doing research on this idea for purposes of selling. By the way, could you hear me? Right at the back? Thank you. Yeah. You are generating this business idea for the purpose of generating sales. In fact, if you don't have sales, you don't have a business actually. Now, that thing is so basic. That thing is so basic, yet this is where most of the things fail. If you can't generate sales, then you don't have a business. Doesn't matter how good your idea is. If it can't generate sales, then it has no meaning. People must be willing to risk their money for you to call it a business. And this is one of the most difficult aspects of a business, to generate sales. When you see these famous companies advertising on TV, the reason is they've come to an understanding that they need to generate sales. Some people, or rather some companies, even as much as 20% of their revenues is plowed back into trying to generate sales. My daughter always keeps me reminding me. Okay, it came from me, but when I'm hearing it from her now, why is she thinking like this? Dad, we've got to generate sales. What? That's what you say. Now the teacher is being taught. But oftentimes that discussion is at the point when money has to be spent. Yeah, and I'm wondering, oh, this makes sense. Are we going to get this money back? But it must generate sales. And this is a lesson you learn the hard way. You can start something that's very good, and in your mind, it has a need and so forth. But at some point or other, the customers try. They have found alternatives, they've gone to other businesses, and now to crank that thing up for you to have repeat sales. And by sales, again, I say in the broadest definition. If you are a doctor and the patients are coming, you are generating sales. We don't often think, we always think in terms of, you are giving medicine and you are consulting. No, you are generating sales. There are some places where generating of sales is not really your effort. If you are running, for example, an undertaking business, COVID can generate sales for you. You don't have to work hard. But for most businesses, you have to make an effort to generate sales. But also, it must be profitable. The sales, the business must be profitable. Now, I have some accounting background, so let me first of all say this because it's important to put it in perspective. A business runs on cash. If you don't have cash, you can't run a business. However good your idea is, you must have cash. However, that cash, when it runs through the business, must run in such a way that it's adding to the cash. So at the end of the year or a month, when you've added up your sales and subtracted your inputs, you must say this business has grown. And that's what we call profit, isn't it? Just what you've added to what you had before. Now, if you don't have that, sooner or later, even the cash you had will disappear. If you are making losses, losses sometimes look like losses can be notional. For example, if I might use this example, depreciation is not cash, but it will impact your bottom line. You can say I've made a loss, but in real terms, it is just a recognition of the diminution in value that your business has suffered because your assets are no longer at the same value as when you bought them. But it doesn't mean that you've lost cash. You can have 100,000 in the bank. You've made a loss of 50,000, but that 50,000 is just the value of your assets which has gone down. But you must be profitable because the sustainability of your business rests on this. If you continue making losses, you will hemorrhage your cash. And before too long, you will now be looking either for expensive sources of money, which you can't sustain, and before too long, there's a receiver knocking at your door. But also, a business idea needs to be scalable. Now, this doesn't apply to every business, but it's a good thing to have, a scalable business. In other words, it is something that you can replicate. You can add volumes, or you can even add by geographical presence. Now, most of the businesses we do are not scalable. And so it can be at the same place for thousands of years. They are not scalable. You can probably increase the sales, but even that may not entirely be under your control. And geographical spread is even more impossible or more difficult. You can do it, but it's a bit more difficult. Take the example of at least a business that I've done before. We're still doing it, but at a very low level, very, very low level. If you're making concrete products, if you want to be present everywhere, it's a very difficult business to be in. Yeah? Very difficult. Or maybe let me give you a neutral one. If you want to practice law, yeah? It's very difficult to say we have a branch in Kitwe. In effect, what you have is that another person is doing that business. Maybe call them a partner rather than that we've expanded. You know what I mean? But if you are selling buns, it's very easy to scale, isn't it? Because you can employ somebody to sell for you in Kitwe. You can sell, somebody can sell for you in Johannesburg, selling milk and so forth. So the best ideas are those ones which are scalable, which don't require your physical presence. A lot of businesses, unfortunately, require you to be present, especially in our country, as we'll be discussing in a few minutes. And then, of course, skills. The idea must have, you must be able to find skills for that idea, to be able to do this. Now, good skills cost a lot of money, And in our country, there's a lot of bluffing. You know, bluffing. I have 1,000 keto. Are you able to take care of it? Boss, me, I can even do 5,000. And you allow that person to come into the business, and before too long, you start seeing dwindling numbers. Now you're 980. Now it's 950. Before too long, the person has disappeared. What has happened? No, 300 keto are missing. They were all eaten by lions. No, he had a deal with a policeman. You know. Skills in our country is one of our greatest weaknesses. I used to think, these guys, the investors come in, and those patriotic things we talk about. The truth of the matter is that we don't have skills in this country, at least not to the level to make us jumpstart. People can't even do typesetting, just write a letter, know where the full stops are, and so forth. We have difficulties. We have serious difficulties. How many of you have been looking for a mechanic in the last 1 year and have found a person who can say, this is a good mechanic and a reliable one? I could give a lot of examples about this, but maybe time doesn't allow us. Let me say briefly something about startup capital. This is one of the biggest challenges about business. In fact, it is next to the question of ideas. You can have a very good idea, but if you can't finance it, it will be dead on arrival. Now, of course, there are grants and loans, but they are not easy to get. So for most of us, we need to start small and gain experience. The money you have, maybe you can put it together with friends. If you can find those who share your dream, put it together and start and nurse that capital and let it generate money. You will lose some. You will lose some money. That goes without saying, especially if the idea is unresearched well, you don't understand it very well. You go into it with these fantastic dreams, and then you discover that, no, actually, you are not the one who controls that business. And then it gets you into a lot of problems, and you can lose money. But you need to pick up, as we'll be saying. Now, vehicles for doing business, I just wanted to say this as the last point about this, about starting up, is that two vehicles really: self-employment, where it's an informal setup. You can just register a business name at Pakra, and you can just have John Hopkins trading as Twesheko Limit, Twesheko and whatever, and Sons, whatever. It's a very simple thing. Register it and a few other statutory things that you need to do. But by all means, register a name. Don't just be doing business with your madam or with your sons behind the scenes. Say, what's the name of your business? And you don't even know. Register that name. But for most of people who want to do business, at least at the level we are thinking about, is that you have to incorporate a limited liability company. This is an entity that is separate from you as a promoter. It is a living, it is a person at law, can sue and be sued. The statutory requirements are very demanding. Now, with the current environment, a movement that started a few years ago, governments increasingly are beginning to realize that we need to make business easy to do for SMEs. There's a very, very lively discussion going on about facilitating small businesses in this country. And I think that for those of you who are starting now, I think you operate in a far much better environment than those who started some years back. So, I thought I should first of all begin from there, just general concepts about business. But really, this talk is about what faith can bring to business. And in my judgment, this is my opinion, is that we have a national crisis. We have a crisis as a country in the area of doing business. And what I would like to do is to just talk about some of the elements of that crisis, and perhaps suggest how we can go around them. And the burden, if I might call it, that I have is just to share with you that there's a problem. That there's a problem we have, but that problem can be impacted very positively by our faith as believers, our faith as the people of God. In this country, we have, first and foremost, a problem about ethics. We are doing business in this country without any concern for ethics. So if it works, it's okay. If it suits me, it's okay. I don't know if we are borrowing it from politicians or politicians are borrowing it from the general society of others. But it is a crisis that we are not even talking about enough. Once in a while, there are newspaper things about, there's a scandal here, this one stole so much money, and so forth and so on. But that behavior which we are seeing about people helping themselves to the public purse is as a result of poor ethics as a country. Let me tease apart some elements of that and perhaps demonstrate them. First of all, we don't deal truthfully with one another in this country. The Zambians are very nice people, but don't believe everything they say, because we can be talking and we're not really committed to what we are saying. It is just talk for the moment. And we can even twist facts in order that it suits us. And when this is found among believers, it's a tragedy that we are not guided by strong ethics. How much did you buy this at? You know that you bought it for 20 kwacha. Yeah? But you have a receipt for 30. You know how that comes about? Because when you go to buy something, the one who is selling you first of all asks, Wamdala, your company or it's for you? Have you come across that? You should ask him, why do you want to know if this is for a company or not? No, Kabidi, if you want, we can write a different price. So when you send somebody to buy something, you have to keep your eyes open. I remember we had a worker who even faked a receipt from Lusaka Hardware. Now, I had been in Lusaka Hardware many times. In fact, I knew the shop owner. I looked at this receipt. And I said, this receipt can't be genuine. These are not the standards. There was even a serial number in red. I sent one of our colleagues, I said, you take this receipt to Mr. Patel. He showed him, he said, no, this is not our receipt. Oh, these receipts, they are just being made by boys outside. So they know people frequent Lusaka Hardware. So you can get a receipt inside, which is genuine, but you can also get a receipt outside of the shop. And we could go to town about this. Example after example about truth not being respected in our dealings with one another. But talk about the area of keeping promises. Now, I'm not saying that we cannot fail to to keep our promises. We can fail. Only God keeps all his promises. We as human beings may be prevented by circumstances beyond our control from keeping the promises we made. But when we are making promises, we must have inside our hearts that we really want to meet what we are saying. A few days ago, I called 2 workshops. We have a problem with transport, and I called 2 workshops. And I said, Faison, please find me a mechanic. I need somebody to come and look at this vehicle, which is giving us problems. The injector pump seems to be a problem. Yeah, and he says, no, I'll get back to you very shortly. And he did. And he gave me the number. And I called another one, and he also gave me a number. Oh, no, there's a guy. But, you know, the first one said to me, boss, I'll be there by 7 hours tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to Monza. He didn't even need to add that, but he added. Now, I'm actually going to Monza, but before I reach Monza, I'll pass by your place. Oh, thank you very much. The other one, no, I'll be there tomorrow morning. First thing, you know, have you heard this word? First thing tomorrow morning. I don't know when first thing, whether it's 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. But first thing tomorrow morning. That is 3 or 4 days ago. I'm still waiting for those mechanics. None of them has even called me to say, you know, I failed to come that day. None of them. When I was sitting there, somebody sent me a text. Let me read it to you. Text message. Morning, boss. Kindly assist me with 500 kwacha. I'm stuck somewhere. We'll pay back this coming week. Anyway. And I knew that this boy can't pay. So I don't know what to do, whether to give him the money or not. Because really, I'm just setting up. If I say he's going to pay, I'm just setting up myself for disappointment. So maybe I'll just decide what I often do. I'll say, okay, let me give him half. And I tell him it's free. Then I don't have to worry about it. Because I know he will not pay. He will not pay. That promise he's making is fake. Sometimes I felt guilty. I'm sure you have also done. You feel guilty. Maybe this one is genuine. The moment the money goes out, that's the end. And then maybe some of them even tell you, I'm done. I am. Just 500 kwacha ni minimum. You are troubling me about 500 kwacha na him. But Zambians also overpromise. Are you able to do tiles? Yes, we can do tiles. Na painting, we know. Even the ceiling, we can. My light, boss, we can fix. In fact, when a person tells me that, I say, no, thank you. Thank you. Just stick to what we've agreed. Let me supervise your work. Make sure you do the right thing. We overpromise. But we can also be involved in outright deception. And I don't have to give you examples. Just outright deception. People are telling you things which they know are not true. But also in the area of undercutting each other. You know, one of the reasons why Zambians don't work together is that we undercut each other. Oftentimes, one of the parties, without good reason, begins to feel that the other person is eating more. Each time we go there, the wife is cooking, bones and, offals, but us, we are suffering. And before too long, because the confidence has been eroded, they now start, going parallel. Before too long, if we were truthful to one another and we are transparent, we should have been working together. And that is why this issue about family, I picked that up from what Pastor was saying, is so important. If we have various systems that tell people, look, this is how you deal with outsiders, we might go a mile in having to inculcate a culture in which people can work together. But theft. In fact, I would say there are very few employees who don't steal in this country. Now, most of you are thinking, no, but he didn't pick things from work. How about those 2 hours which you've spent on the computer belonging to the company and you are sending personal messages. You are even doing business on that PC, which time you should have been using to further the interest of the business. But also loyalty. One Indian gentleman I knew, I asked him, you people, why do you succeed in your businesses? There are very few Indians, there are very few Lebanese who don't have success. But maybe that's a microcosm of the larger population which we see because those people are risk takers maybe. But I asked him that question. And he just said, you know what? In this country, you don't have loyalty. You don't have loyalty. Even your employees, if I came and I just offered him 10 kwacha more, he's going to leave you. We don't operate like that. For us, we see long term. So if I enter a business, I decide, this is my boss, I'm going to do my best. And I'm available 24/7. You can call me anytime. For me, if I have an employee, I call him at 18 hours, he feels harassed. And this is a mechanic. He's feeling harassed at 18. He even switches off his phone at 18 hours. But he knows that there are vehicles out there that need his attention. So the point is this, and I've spent too much time on this, because I think this is where our greatest problem as a country. No government will be able to do anything that takes us to where we can be if this matter is not resolved. The World Bank did a study many years ago on a concept called social capital. Now, the question they were answering is, why is it that we've given the Palestinians so much money? Every year we give them. And we gave them the same money to Japan. And look at where they are. Why is it that this one is failing? They are still asking for arms. And Japan was even able to build the first train from the resources from the World Bank. And they came to this conclusion that the differences is as follows. The difference is what they termed social capital. Now, social capital are those intangibles in a society, values that enhance business. For example, trust. Do you know that among the Indians, they can lend each other money without writing anywhere? You know that, huh? Yeah, they lend each other money without writing anywhere. No. They just know that, okay, that one owes me money. Ha! For us, even if 20 pages of the agreement, it will still be broken. Now, what ethics do is that they enhance this social capital. And as a result, you have high levels of trust, and high levels of trust reduce transaction costs. They make business predictable. You know, if a guy says, I'm coming in 10 minutes, he's coming in 10 minutes. You've come, no, boss, I'm just around the corner. I'll just be here. I'll be here in a few minutes. 2 hours. Where are you? No, I'm just nearby. 18 hours. Our boss, I think let's just do this thing tomorrow. The thing is unpredictable. But also, if you have high levels of ethics in a society, you reduce the risk of doing business. Please bring me the following goods at 10 hours tomorrow. Because at 10 hours tomorrow, I have the following things to do, and they bring it. In Japan, they have this system just in time. Now, what it does is, Toyota, for example, doesn't manufacture all the parts you see on your vehicle. But they have contracted people or companies that can bring that spare part required for the assembly line just when it's needed. Of course, with a bit of flexibility, because sometimes things can go wrong, maybe a day or so, yeah? But they'll bring it, so Toyota doesn't have to invest in the warehouses of spare parts to manufacture their vehicles. Those parts are in the various places. I'm sure you've heard about that. But also, high ethics, increase productivity. So, what faith can do is that it brings high ethics, first and foremost. Let me now rush into the rest. How much more time do I have, Mr. Moderator? 15? Okay, so let me rush through it. The other thing that I think is very important that faith can bring to business is a correct view of work. Now, the prevalent views of business are the following. First of all, that it's dirty. People think that making a profit is sinful. There are some people who think like that. They feel guilty if they make a profit. They think that competition is a problem, and money itself is something they don't relate to well because it's often riddled in scandals, clouded in scandals. As was said earlier by Pastor, people think that business is just a means of amassing wealth, and some people even think it's a means to be among those who are counted. So a person starts a business because he wants to be like that guy. People can admire me and so forth. That is what the world thinks. They even say, when you are challenging them, like, no, we can't do this. He says, no, my friend, this is business. This is just business. You know what I mean? It's like this is outside of the realm of the normal. Don't worry about those things you're worrying about. This is just about business. We just need to make money. But the correct view of work, which is the bedrock of business, is that business is a means of work. It's a form in which we work. We use it. We are working and producing goods and services that meet human needs. But we are working. The owner is working. The workers under him or her are working. And there are 4 things I want to emphasize around this idea. First of all, is that when we are doing business, we are obeying Genesis. I don't think I need to persuade you about that because it was amply handled earlier. But let me just rock your imagination a little bit. We often view Adam as being in a garden, and it's very nice and green and with animals. I'm not so sure it was, there was a garden, but I'm not so sure how much he achieved before he died in those 900 years. But let's imagine that Adam was to come today and arrive in this room. What would he see? What would he see? He would see this, for example, a microphone. I don't know, I don't think he had. Yeah? You made this. Yes, where is this thing? Oh, you mean the sound is going and it's coming from there? You would be shocked. And yet the ability to do this is from Genesis. Adam would be shocked to find the internet. As Pastor was saying, that in this era, there are things which can enable us to send pictures in an instant across the globe, thousands of kilometers, immediately, and you can speak to somebody. He would be shocked. But all that is from Genesis. Create, have dominion. So when we're doing business, we are actually obeying Genesis 1 to create things from our God-given abilities and from the resources that are present. Actually, we brought nothing into the world. We find everything here. We are born here ignorant. We gain some knowledge, and we can produce things because God has embedded in us abilities to convert. Can you imagine? Those stones we are seeing there, taken through a process, can turn into cement. Can you imagine that? They can be stones like that. But those very same stones, put through a process, can turn into cement. These tiles we are seeing here, this is just soil. If they are ceramic tiles, it's just a clay. If they are porcelain tiles, it's a rock. We can polish them to these levels. We take a stone, we melt it, and out of it we produce bars. We can produce those bars. far higher in strength than the rocks from which they were taken. So we are obeying Genesis 1. But like I said, and I don't want to over-amplify this, we meet human needs through business. But I wanted also to emphasize that in business, we are actually imitating God. John 5, verse 17, the Lord Jesus said, my Father is working even up to now. As we speak, God is working. God works. And when we do business and we're working, we are imitating God. But also, like I said earlier, is that it's an opportunity for us to use our talents. So this is what faith brings, a correct view of work. And it's an enriching view of work. Even in the moments when you are feeling low, you go back to yourself and say, no, this is what God wants me to be. If I might be bold enough to share this, one of the crises I faced after the loss of my wife was this question of purpose. I would wake up in the morning and think to myself, why should I do anything? And the Lord in His grace took me back to Genesis. And I had to start building again. It is not because somebody as precious as she was being present. It's not a presence. It is that there's a calling. So I wake up in the morning, give orders or whatever, give instructions, participate in some things, because that is what God wants me to do, regardless of what the circumstances might be. So faith brings that understanding, the correct view of work, so that we're able to engage in whatever God has called us to with joy, with a sense of purpose. But another thing that I think faith can bring is productivity. And I just want to use a very simple illustration, the parable of the talents. We can say many things about the parable of the talents, but one of the things that it teaches is just productivity. One had 5, and he produced what? 10. He made another 5, so got 10. The one who had 10 produced another 10 and got what? 20. The one who had 1, what should he have produced? He should have had 2, isn't it? That's the argument. Yeah, I'm not asking you to produce 5. If you can, well and good. But I'm just expecting you to, if you have 1, produce 1. Be productive. And all that is in the scriptures. So, when I'm working, I'm thinking, how can I make this business double the revenues next year? It's not an easy one. Very tough. Very, very tough. But that's what I'm thinking. I need to be productive. God requires me to double what I'm doing. Maybe 30 may not be doubling. Maybe 60 may not be doubling. But 100 certainly is doubling. But God expects me to add something. Now, sadly, that is the exception rather than the rule. The common attitudes in business is that people don't care about whether they are making a contribution or not. And most people you will employ, they want a job, but not the work. Yeah, our national conversation now is employment, isn't it? But the moment people get work, they forget. Customers have entered shops, I'm going in there, people are even doing their nails. Move on a chan. And, the owner is thinking, no, my workers are working. But they're just doing their own thing. Doing personal business, like I said, in official time, this is very common. Very, very common. In some companies, they've had to restrict internet use and say you can only access your personal emails from 7 to 9 hours. After that, if you're found to be on Facebook or doing emails, it's an offense. Because productivity is low. People don't want to put in a fair share. But if you're a Christian, you must be persuaded. that you must have this parable of the talents at the back of your mind. Or if you're a business owner, you're thinking, no, I can't be here today. I must be growing. We were doing a contract for 1 million this year. We're looking maybe to double that. We go to 2 million, 10 million, whatever level God has put you at. But the other thing that faith brings is fair business practices. I don't have to persuade you, brethren, that God requires us to use fair scales. But we have in this country an obsession with huge margins. I buy something at 20 kwacha, I want to sell it for 100 kwacha. Why? It's a form of laziness and it's a form of deceit. Because if I get something for 20 kwacha and I sell it for 100 kwacha, then I don't have to work for the next 3-4 months. That's our mentality as Zambians. We don't want to say, no, my margin is 25 or is 30%. We don't want that discipline of putting the correct margin on what you are selling. And as a result, your customers feel exploited. They won't come back next time. They'll find a cheaper way to do it. We must use fair scales. As a basic minimum, recover your costs and have some margin so that tomorrow you have a way, tomorrow you'll be able to repair your vehicle, you'll be able to do the next assignment. But don't exploit people. One of the difficulties I find, a person comes, they have no job. They have no job, they're sitting at home. I said to them, okay, how much can you do tiling for me? No, boss, as we do 80 kwacha per square meter. I said, no. This thing you're talking about is even more than I'm charging the client. So how do I give you 80 kwacha per square meter? And you can spend hours arguing about it. Because why? They want this job to meet every need they have. They want to solve all their problems. We need to use fair scales. And in this country, we are riddled with unfair business practices. We want to wipe out our competition. We snatch their workers. We put low prices. We know these are not even economic prices, but we put them there in order that we drive out. There's one business, I don't want to mention his name because they can maybe sue me. But one of the most popular companies that advertise a lot on TV is involved in this unfair competition. One of them, his friend, they used to go to the same mosque. The friend has vowed never to go to that mosque. They can't enter the same mosque at the same time. Because what he does is that he notices a business, and he seeks to drive out his friends from there. So he is not innovating. All he is doing is involved in price wars. I'm sure you can guess. But we can also steal patents or ideas. A friend of yours calls you, "Man, I've got an idea. Let's discuss this." And you are listening into it. "Yeah, this is a very good idea." But at the back of your mind, you're thinking, how can I do this? Before too long, if I know I've started something, I've got partners from South Africa, we are doing this. But man, I'm the one who saw this idea too. Why didn't you tell me in advance that you were looking for other people? No, and friendships are broken on account of that. Bribery. Now the police are less and less on our streets. But bribery is a very big problem. I could tell you stories, but we don't have the time for it. But I remember one time the secretary of a very influential businessman in this country coming to my office, and that time I was working, and he says, "No, but if we just give you this amount, it's okay. I mean, we're not asking you, we're not stealing from the company." Let me explain this, it's very important. I was in charge of investments of an institution. And the job there is, we have money and we are putting it in various banks in order to, of course, maintain value and earn a return on it, to fund our expenditures. And this guy had the bank, and he obviously wanted us to be depositing most of the money there. So he comes to the office, and she comes to the office, the one he sent. He's trying to persuade me, no, look, if we, instead of 5%, we can give you a rate of just 5.5, and the 5.5 is yours. You are not stealing from your employer. So I said, no, madam. I mean, I don't know. Maybe at that point I couldn't think of an answer to say this is a form of stealing. But I just said to her, madam, if I'm unhappy with my salary that I'm being paid here, I have an option. Either I can negotiate with my employer or I can leave. But this, that's not how we run. I talked about partners teaching each other, and sometimes even among people who profess faith. So, faith can cure this. There is one more slide and I will end. I don't know if I've mixed it up with, the last one. Faith can bring discipline and perseverance. And in the long run, this is essential to running a business. Let me just say this. Building a business takes long and requires much effort and dedication. And what the Bible tells us is that we must work hard. The hard-working farmer is the one who must be the first to eat of the fruits, but we must be involved in health competition, getting the best ideas and running our abilities and our systems against those best ideas. At the end of the day, the main business that you have as a business manager is planning and controlling. Planning in the morning, waking up, sitting on a desk, how will the day go today? What can we achieve? Where can we save money? And making sure that that is happening. John, where are you? No, I'm in town. No, I think move from there. You've been there too long. You need to go to the next assignment because, this is happening. That is hard work. Some people say, they're always just sitting in their offices. But that's where the work is. Don't feel embarrassed. Yes, be on the shop floor, as they call it. I use it in inverted commas. But your main job as a business person is planning and controlling. Now, businesses fail. And they can fail for various reasons. It can be a topic for another seminar. But generally, typically, what you find is that businesses will have this kind of a life experience. In the first year, 20% of all businesses are likely to fail. So if you have 100 companies that are registered and begin work, 20% will fall out in the first year. By the 5th year, 50% have fallen off. By the 10th year, 65% have fallen off. And by the 15th year, 85% have fallen off. So only 15% of all businesses which start succeed beyond the 15th year. Yeah? The race is not to the swift, the wise man said. However, this is not to say that we should persevere in spite of the facts. Sometimes it's important to look the facts in the face and cut your losses and move on. Sometimes that decision has to be made, regardless of what the consequences might be. But nonetheless, the Bible tells us we should work hard, we should persevere, we should make every effort to ensure that what we start, when we put our hand to the plow, 10, 20 years from now, it will still be standing. Our children, as we're being admonished earlier, can take over what we've started. I think that if we Christians think right, we have a greater reason to succeed in what we do than the non-believers. Sadly, the Lord Jesus said, the men of this world are more shrewd than believers. Yeah, that's the truth. But be as wise as a serpent, but as innocent as doves. And pray that God will make whatever we start stand the test of time, that other people will benefit from it for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll agree that that was very inspiring talk. So I think we now have listened to the two presentations, so we're opening for questions for the next 15 or so minutes. So as I said before, if you have a question, you don't want to stand up, you can write and I can read it out. Or there's a roving mic, as we said earlier, so if there's... So we are open to questions both for Pastor Mbewe and Mr. Chetamson. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Panga. Maybe if there are many, we can take maybe 3 questions or 2 and then answer them another set. Roy has got a big voice, so you can just ask. Since the mic is... Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions so that we form a set of 2-3 questions? Yes. I thought you were going to go further. That's a question. How can we ensure that we succeed as Christians? Can we have a third so that we form a set? Yeah. Dr. Single. maybe we take those three, then Charles, you'll be in the next. You're just adding, so that will, okay. So just to add, how do we learn from Zambians and especially Christians? Yes. So, Pastor Jetta.
Yeah, let me begin with the first one about individuals that think that economics, business is all about economics and forget what the Bible says. To some extent, I think what they are saying is the fact that the Bible is primarily about salvation from sin, rather than about, for instance, how to dig copper ore out of the ground. So if you're going to dig copper ore out of the ground, you won't start looking for verses in the Bible. You go and learn mining somewhere, and then you do it. So I think that's what they really mean. What we mean by the sufficiency of Scripture is that the principles that then undergird the whole of life, including digging up copper ore, is in the Bible. So it's really the principles that then enable us to know what to do when we get there. So if individuals are made to appreciate that, then we begin to see that the whole of life is undergirded by the mind of the Creator, who has consequently given us the Bible. So we need to meet halfway in that sense, so that we don't begin to give the impression that everything in life is inside the Bible. The primary reason why the Bible has been given to teach us about God, in order that we might know Him through salvation. How do we ensure we do not fail but succeed? I think the second speaker made it abundantly clear. There's nothing that God has said to us that will prevent us from failing. So even Christians will fail in different areas. Even pastors sometimes start churches, and then the churches collapse. Can you imagine? It's a pastor and it's church and still collapses. You know, what more other businesses? I think the key, as we're learning earlier, is being individuals who are studious, who are learning, who are doing research. I think we told about research earlier, consulting before you jump out, and so forth. Doing a lot of those reduce the possibility of failure. It doesn't cancel it out completely. With respect to fellow Africans not wanting to share, it's in our African thinking, our African culture. We tend to think of blessings, or just a phrase good, as a commodity that therefore if you share, you have half of it remaining, and therefore comes the reluctance to do so. So if, for instance, I've come up with a business of say roasting peanuts, and then adding different flavors to those peanuts, and therefore making people's taste buds dance when they're eating my peanuts. I'm likely to be a little reluctant to share with you how I'm doing it, because my thinking is when you start doing the same, my market reduces. Instead of me thinking that Zambia has 15 million people and therefore this can multiply, I'm thinking purely of you as a competitor who will eat away into my market. So I think that background tends to largely inform the way in which we function. Again, biblical instruction is likely to free us from that kind of mentality. But it won't happen overnight. And that's the reason why it's likely to still continue that way. Okay, so hopefully the next 3 questions will now be answered by, and then he can add a little more to this.
Adding anything. It's not that. But can you hear me? Yeah. The information costs money. And if you really believe that your idea is good,
Okay, I always say this when it comes to questions. I know there's always that person who has that question. I always want that question also to come out. So, yes, Eric, go ahead. To work for it. Thanks for that addition. There's a question here. There was another hand raised. Yes, Mate. Yeah, it's a good question. It's clear. Why can't Christians come together to do business? Mr. Majum? Can we have a third so that we complete the set? How to justify price. Can I add a fourth one which came from Facebook? Very short one. I think Pastor Mbewe may answer this one. It says, a serpent in the Bible is often associated with evil. So when Jesus says, be as wise as a serpent, which was quoted by Mr. Cheta, and as innocent as a dove, what are we to understand by this? Okay. The question is clear. It's like an apparent contradiction. The serpent in the snake, the serpent in the garden, and the request or the statement by Christ to be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. Okay, thank you. Those 4 questions.
Can I just go in the order in which they came? Yeah, the question about Zambia is not, in a way, being lazy to look for quality information. I think I will just take that as an observation, and we'll just make every effort ourselves to do something about it. The harsh economic environment, indeed, it is harsh. How can we ensure that we synergize, as was being said, so that we can work together better? I think this is going to take time. This is a realistic way of looking at it. It's going to take time. As we build quality relationships in churches, we have the same understanding about things, or at least to some extent. We will find partnerships of people of like mind. It's not something that can be done overnight. First of all, we are coming maybe from an environment in which we are even suspicious of being in business. Oh, those brothers, those are in business. It's like they are the spiritual ones, and so forth. When we are comfortable with the idea that actually engaging in business is part of our calling from God, and we inculcate ethics and value systems that we are all comfortable with, it should be easy. And in a way that speaks to the impact of the gospel on us. Let me put it this way. We need a revival that changes our culture in this land, where we begin to think aright. We're not thinking aright. And we're just copying from non-believers. Oh, this one did this, they did this, and they succeeded. We need the Lord to transform us. But the short of it is that it's going to take time. But we should be making an effort. If you find a brother is doing something and say, can we work together? Can we try it out? Set the rules at the very beginning. This is how I want us to do business. And hopefully, as we see more people succeeding, it will rub on and it will become a culture. But it takes time. How does one justify price? Maybe this is easy. For me, this one is very easy. And I want to answer it this way. First of all, there is a concept of gross margin. Maybe let me begin from here. As a basic minimum, your sales or your revenues should cover your costs. It's a major principle. You may not do it in the first year. Maybe not even in the second year. Maybe not even in the third year. That is why the issue of capital is important. Yeah? Can you imagine when the FNB came into this market? Do you know that they didn't make a profit for 6 years? FNB never made a profit for 6 years. They just wanted to grow their balance sheet first. And they knew that if you grew their balance sheet, then the money will come. So, FNB posted their first profit as a bank in the 7th year of their income. But they were operating because they had a huge balance sheet being supported from salary. And when we were transacting, in the first year, we were thinking, this is banking. No, they were making losses. So, the point is that your sales or your revenue should cover your costs, but it may not happen in the first year. But secondly, there is benchmarking. If in this industry in which you've entered, the gross margin is 40%, I hope you understand this. I hope you can. Maybe let me just go ahead. If your the gross margin in the industry is 40%, don't put it at 80. Again, it goes back to understanding where you are going, understanding the nature of the business you are doing, the environment. You will have gathered that information. And then you will have calculated. So 40%. If I pump in 100 kwacha, my gross margin will be 40. If I subtract salaries and so forth and so on and so on, I'll end up in minus 20. How can I bridge this gap? Okay, for the first year, I'll put in my own money. Maybe the second year, I can live with this. So you will have done those projections. They call them cash flow projection. So there's benchmarking. But there are some areas in which benchmarking doesn't work. Because maybe it's a new field, or, the intricacies of, the information is kind of hidden. For example, how many people know how much it costs to make a fritter? Do we know? We don't, because the fritter doesn't have a size. You know what I mean? The fritter doesn't have a size. There's a size. So in those cases, what you do is you sit down. How much does flour cost me? How much does cooking oil cost me? How much charcoal am I? How much is my labor? That can be very difficult. Yeah, but if I spend 2 hours on this thing, what is my worth? If somebody called me and said, come and work for me for a day, what is my worth? You know what? Zambians don't have answers to that question. The artisan you call to come and do plumbing at your place doesn't answer that question. He doesn't know. How much is this? 1,000. You, the cost of you if you are working is 200 kwacha per day. You want to work for me for 2 hours and I pay you 1,000. Boss, but this is fair. What do you mean it's fair? No, but you know what I mean? So, it's very important to answer that question. What is the value of your time? And then you put it in and say, okay, this thing, it's costing me 100 kwacha. But if I just recover 100 kwacha, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So, what margin can I put? Now that's a value, that's a judgment you're having to make. Can I put in 20 kwacha? Can I put 20 kwacha on top? Can I put 30 kwacha? And you need to segment your market. You've seen those boys who sell things along the streets, eh? They come with, say, something like, boss, 50 kwacha, 50 kwacha. As you are driving, okay, 40. Going to continue driving, okay, 30 kwacha. Boss, you can just give me 20 kwacha and if you know combo, you know that one? And by the time he's reached 20 kwacha, you are now looking at him and he knows he's got your attention. Those boys, although they have not gone into school, they know how to segment the market. Yeah, they know, okay, I'll start from here. Because they can give me maybe even 50 kwacha. So they keep, the point I'm trying to make in a more sanctified way is to say this. Know your market. And sometimes just tweaking your product a little bit can add a lot of value and you can sell it for a higher price. Let me mention this. Do you know the most profitable product that Toyota produces? The most profitable. Would you know? No, it's a Corolla. The Corolla is the most profitable product that Toyota, unless maybe it has changed over the years, but it has been. Toyota makes more money on Toyotas, so on Corollas, than on these big vehicles we see. Because it costs a lot of money to put up those big GXs and so on. And the market also has a limit to which people can accept that price. But a Corolla, you say, 10,000. I can manage it. Yeah? And yet they are making 15, they are selling rather 10,000, but they are making maybe 3,000 out of it. So the point is that pricing is a matter of judgment, the market, the circumstances, the customer, what your effort is. You need to put all that in. And realistically in your heart, you can say to yourself, as a Christian, what I'm charging is fair. Okay? What I'm charging is fair. And sometimes you can also charge much lower than you're supposed to charge because there is a benefit you get internally at all. There are some people outside, what they look, they are looking for eggs. How many are they looking for? No, they are looking for 5 eggs. Just give them. You know what I mean? You've sold them for free, isn't it? So when you're making those judgments, you need to be at peace in your heart that what I'm charging is fair. By benchmarking, by knowing your costs and not overblowing. And if you have a conscience as a Christian, it will tell you that here you've gone overboard. It will tell you. And maybe ask somebody for an opinion. I'm not so sure if I should comment, Pastor, on this as being as wise as serpents and being as innocent as doves. Perhaps Pastor is better. Yeah? Can I leave you to cover?
Yeah, we all must handle our kinds of problems. So when it comes to issues of business, if you come to ask me, it's because you want your business to fail. You must go and ask that man. So about why Christians don't do business together or how they can do business together, that's obviously him as well. Price, benching prices, that's him as well. But being as wise as a serpent and as innocent as a dove is the statement our Lord made in the context of saying in Matthew 10, if I can just quickly take us there, that I'm sending you out as sheep or lambs among wolves. So that's the context. And always when you're trying to understand what has been said in a text, just go to the wider context, and it always helps. So he said in verse 16, behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. And then he says, therefore, be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. It doesn't end there. He continues in the same context of persecution, which is the sheep among wolves. It's you are sharing the truth among people that don't like you, and therefore they want to get rid of you. Verse 17, beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors, and so on. So that's the context in which Jesus uses these words. And notice it's two phrases there. One is be wise, and the other is be innocent. Okay, so those two phrases are juxtaposed next to each other in order to balance each other off. So the serpent has a certain quality about him, and yet, because, as the person who asked rightly pointed out, because he's a serpent, he also has something that is negative about him. Okay, often he uses, if we can use the phrase in Genesis 3, there the phrase that is used is craftiness. He normally uses craftiness for an evil intent. So chapter 3 of Genesis verse 1, now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. So he's crafty, but uses it in sinful ways. And what Jesus is saying here is, in the midst of this animosity, be crafty, but do it in a way that is innocent, a way that is righteous. An example of this, very quickly, is Acts 23. Paul, as you know, had enemies among the Jews. They really wanted him dead. That's the bottom line. And finally, they got him arrested in chapter 21 of Acts in the temple. And trust me, he did not do anything wrong. In fact, he even almost compromised, would be the right term, in order to get away from the temple without being into trouble, by getting the people that he was with circumcised and so on, which he himself didn't really want. But the other church leaders prevailed on him to do so. But they still arrested him and harangued him and so on, brought all kinds of accusations against him. And finally, as they brought him before the Sanhedrin, listen to verse 6, chapter 23, verse 6. Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I'm a Pharisee, a son of a Pharisee. It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial." That immediately caused chaos. The Sanhedrin itself now became divided. We are told, and when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. And then we have the explanation. In the end, the whole trial came to nothing. And he had to be taken into the barracks and so on. So, what did he do there? He was crafty. That's all he did. But he was innocent. Okay, he didn't tell lies, but he just perceived. He said, here. This is the way to get out of this nasty situation. That's all he did. Again, they made a plot to kill him. And they sent some people to say, okay, let him go back to trial. And halfway, they would ambush him and kill him. Thankfully, a nephew of his heard the plot and came and told him this is what they're planning to do. So again, exactly the same thing. He didn't just say, "Lord, trust the Lord. You know, God is sovereign." No. He sent that boy quietly to go and whisper to what is called the tribunal, but it's one person, or rather the tribune is one person. And they went, he whispered to him, and so that's how they sneaked him out at night and sent him to Caesarea for the ongoing trial. And I don't know how these guys survived, because they made a vow never to eat until they kill him. I'm sure they must have finally, after 3 to 4 days, eaten, you know, and so on. So, bottom line is, that's all it is saying. It's not saying we must be like the serpent throughout, because the serpent is crafty for evil purposes. For us, let's be smart in the midst of a world that hates us, but let's do it innocently. Thank you very much.
I think we have come to the end, unless there are that question. There's that one. The one you wanted to ask, and they closed the meeting too soon. Yes, Auntie Fro.
who was persuading me that we should give something so that other people give us business. You know, boss, that person, they need 10% from whatever. If we win that contract, we win that tender, they need 10%. Everybody is doing it. Yeah, okay, everybody is doing it, but at least me, I'm not doing it. So that is the difficult. So you need to be very wise about it. Certainly being unequally worked with non-believers in the area of business, I think it will come to ruin very quickly. And to use the modern terminology, it will end up in tears. I mean, it will end up in tears. Yeah, so you can partner with other people, but be very careful, be very selective about how that is. And in the initial stages, especially business in the initial stages, if it's small, yeah, you are better off nurturing the idea first, reaches a certain stage where you can now invite people and you can tell them, look, this is our value system. If you have a diversified company in terms of ownership, like Lafarge, you can't insist that Lafarge should operate like a Christian entity. The ownership is so widespread that even your contribution is nothing. But maybe you might become, when you become a majority shareholder, then you can start insisting on certain things. But a small thing which operates on a simple desk in a room, then you invite a partner who is saying, no, man, this is just business. It can't work. I don't know if I've answered your question. Thank you. Pastor, I think.
Yeah, to the question that's, if I got Sister Florence correctly, about a person who's involved in business and their participation or relevance to the cause of Christ in the kingdom of God and so on. I think the example I gave is obviously one such example, and that brother has obviously had his own mark over time. But it's wrong to think of a business person purely in terms of money, you know, that's just dollars you're seeing over his face. There are a lot of other ways in which business people can contribute. For instance, I've taken you here to Romans 12, that's talking about different gifts that we might have in the body. And I'll just read verse 6 down to verse 8. It says, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. And then the first one speaks about if prophecy in proportion to your faith. And again, there it's talking in terms of one's ability to articulate truth. Again, all it is saying is if that's the gift that you have, use it as God has gifted you. So some business people are actually very good teachers. And so you can still use them in the church in the context of teaching, and perhaps even in the context of writing books about teaching, rather about certain topics that they are good at, and so forth. And through that, blessing the church. And then there is if service in our serving. And there it's speaking more in terms of diaconal service, being individuals that are always thinking in terms of meeting the physical needs of other people. Again, we've already seen that what should inspire us in business is not simply, the money, that if you now keep bees, you're going to make honey, and then you sell honey and you make money, and so on. You should be thinking more in terms of the gap. What is that gap that I can exploit positively to make people's lives better, easier, and so on? And consequently, you innovate in that sense. Well, the same can be done in the context of the Christian church as well. And what this brother was doing by using his finances, he was basically saving pastors, because he knows pastors are not likely to take their wives to a 5-star hotel for 2 to 3 days, and yet they can benefit for that kind of relaxation. And so he was providing a service. The one who teaches, we've already dealt with there. the one who exhorts in his exhortation. Again, that can also be applied in terms of, just the energy that one is pulsating with in the realm of business. That can also be utilized in terms of just encouraging other people. Contributing, I think that's obvious because we are thinking in terms of money. There are often financial needs in the church. Some of you may have seen the first 6 to 7 years of my pastorate, I used to ride a bicycle. And basically, it's that same South African businessman who bought it for me. I left Zambia, going to South Africa. I used to have an Ego bicycle. I only had it for less than a month, and it was stolen. The thieves who broke into my house even put things onto the same bicycle and rode out of my yard on the bicycle. And within a week or two, I had a trip to South Africa. And I was with this brother. We were having a meal in a pastor's home. And I narrated what had happened. And unknown to me, as I finished my entire trip, I was there for 2 weeks. The day I was now supposed to be coming back to Zambia, there was a box that was very big. And this pastor says, "Are you able to carry this to Zambia?" "What is in it?" He said, it's a bicycle. That same brother has bought it for you. So the thieves must have been very upset when they saw what bicycle I was now riding after the one they stole. They must have thought, okay, they should have delayed by 2 weeks before coming to steal. But again, it's the generosity that is there that they're able to do. And then there's leadership as well, one who leads with zeal. That's another aspect. And again, it's, a person who's proving himself in business is probably a good leader. And therefore, that leadership could be used in the various departments of the church. And then again, it talks about acts of mercy, which is like giving generously and serving and so on. So all I'm saying in looking at this passage is that people who are involved in business are not just money. There's so much about their lives that they could be utilized in the local church, but also further afield, that they can put in finances as well. Our SCU land that we bought, half of the money was given by one businessman. He's a black South African who has gave about $125,000 to buy the land. And it wasn't his own church, it's us. So we can be a helper in a wider sphere. But others are just board members because they've known what it means to be in boards through business. And so they're able to come onto a board like African Christian University and use their experience and gifts and so on. So all that to say, it's a variety of ways that business people can be utilized in the life of the church. And I think we ought to first of all, as business people, be used, but also as church leaders provide opportunities for people in business, not just to give financially, but to also participate in the life of the church. Thank you very much. Back to you. Yeah, that's an even easier one than serpents and doves. It's that they told a lie, they told a half-truth. Yeah, they said they sold, this is the whole amount for the land they had, when in actual fact they had kept some back. And as they were told, really, it was yours before you sold, it was yours after you sold. What was wrong with simply saying this is part of the money? You know, so it was that hypocrisy that cost them a fortune. Yeah. Thank you. Now, I will need to leave shortly because I'm preaching.
So we have come to the end, actually. We're only requesting a group photo for everyone. And also just to mention that I think there's still food. Please take some packs, take home to Madame. She'll be happy to encourage you to come next time, hopefully. And also, what else did I? Oh, yeah, yes. So, from the men's exec, I think the only member who's here is our brother Raymond. So I'll ask him to come and just give a vote of thanks and close in prayer for us.
For the vote of thanks, I'll begin with God Himself for having this opportunity availed to us to be in this house of prayer in such a manner. And next, I want to thank our elders and deacons for giving us spiritual leadership for this activity and to continue in like manner. But special recognition, I'd like to recognize the three women who have joined us today. Not embarrassing you women, please, you can just stand. The three ladies, 3 women, rather, or 4 women. If you can just stand. The 4. Please, it was open to everyone, the young to the old. The 3 women have joined us. Please take a seat. We would like to have such a, please, applause. We would like it to be in such a manner like this that they continue to join us whenever they are called upon. I'd also want to thank the leadership led by a professor, the men's lean team of 5, the men who are behind the work, behind the scenes, the things we don't see. Some of that high resolution poster there has been done by somebody and others, but to thank them. The media team for streamlining this activity and even for recording it. Those who are asking for the flashes, you can go to Evangel Baptist Facebook page, and then you'll find it will always be there. And then just to thank ourselves. From the 32 people, 21 are from Evangel. Bachete came with his proteges. I can see 5. I know at KBC there's something happening there. He came alone, but we got Evangel Baptist, we got somebody from Matero, Ilanda, and somebody I've forgotten, I can't remember exactly, but one person from one of the Pentecostal churches. Let us give ourselves a hand of applause. Let us now close in prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, we thank you for this glorious time we have spent together. We thank you for Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28. Where you place man to subdue, to multiply, and have dominion all over everything that was placed in his care. And you put him at the center of it all and blessed him. And you have blessed us even through the speakers. We thank you for the speakers who prepared ably and for the leading of the Holy Spirit through them and unto us. This is our ought to be. The Christian teaching and even learning has been given at your feet. Now dismiss us with your blessing, go before us and with us, and go before the preachers, and even as they go to do other activities, that Lord, we have made Heavenly Father us at a point of need. Above, want to pray for the integrity that, Lord, in our affairs of entrepreneurship and business, we place it at the core, at the center of it all. In Jesus' name we do pray with thanksgiving in our hearts. Amen. Please, as our chairperson said, we can go behind there. The chairman said there's some food and there are brochures you can take, and please greet them as you go home. Thank you very much.